The explosion shook the entire medical wing of the Imperial Palace. Lucy Hayes dropped the supply cart she'd been organizing and grabbed the wall for balance. Around her, alien medical staff scattered in 4 different directions, their various appendages flailing in panic. Through the transparent walls, she could see smoke pouring from Bay 7. This was the 3rd explosion today. Lucy had been working at the palace for only 6 months. Transferred from the Human Colony Medical Center as part of some diplomatic exchange program she didn't fully understand. Most days were quiet, almost boring. She treated minor injuries, organized supplies, and tried not to embarrass humanity by doing something stupid in front of species that had mastered space travel, while her ancestors were still figuring out fire. Today was not most days. All non-essential personnel, evacuate to safe zones. A calm voice announced through the palace system. Lucy recognized it as the AI that ran most palace operations. Medical emergency continues in bays 5 through 9. High Physician Renth slithered past her at surprising speed for someone whose species moved on their bellies. His scales were usually a calm blue, but right now they flashed angry red patterns. Another containment failure, he hissed to his assistant. A floating creature that looked like a jellyfish made of light. The graviton cage lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes! Lucy stayed pressed against the wall, trying to be invisible. She'd learned early that being the only human in most rooms meant people either stared at her constantly or forgot she existed. Right now, invisible seemed better. Through the smoke, she heard it. A sound that made her chest tight with recognition, even though she'd never heard anything quite like it before. It was high-pitched, scared, and angry all at once. A cry that sounded almost like a scream, but with harmonics that made her teeth ache. The baby dragons were terrified. Everyone knew the story by now. Emperor Talmanoth, ruler of 3,000 star systems, had placed 3 dragon eggs in stasis 400 years ago, when the last breeding pair died. Dragons weren't just pets or symbols. They were living proof of imperial legitimacy, bioengineered companions that bonded with rulers at the genetic level. Without dragons, the Emperor's authority could be questioned by the dozens of species that made up the Imperium. The eggs had been in perfect stasis for centuries. Then 3 days ago they hatched. Nobody knew why they hatched early. Nobody knew why all 3 eggs activated at once. But the moment those hatchlings emerged, chaos followed. Lucy had only glimpsed them once through multiple layers of transparent barriers. They were small, maybe the size of earth dogs, with scales that seemed to shift between colors like oil on water. They had 6 legs, 2 wings, and heads that were almost triangular with massive eyes, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Beautiful, terrifying, and completely out of control. The first day, they'd destroyed 2 medical bays by breathing some kind of superheated plasma. The second day, one of them figured out how to phase through solid matter and ended up inside the palace power core before guards managed to lure it out with raw meat. Today, they seemed to be working together, breaking every containment system the Imperium's best scientists could design. Medical Bay 7 is lost, High Physician Renth announced to the assembled staff. His red scales had faded to a dull purple, which Lucy had learned meant resignation. We're moving them to Bay 12. It has triple reinforced walls and a stasis field generator. A bird-like alien with 4 arms raised 1 wing. Honored physician, we've tried stasis fields. They escaped. This is a newer model. They escaped the newest model 90 minutes ago. Renth's scales flickered through several colors Lucy had no translation for. Then we'll modify it. We have 6 days before the bonding window closes. If the Emperor cannot complete the ceremony within 10 days of hatching, the dragons become feral. Permanently. That cannot happen. Lucy understood the unspoken part. If the dragons went feral, they'd have to be destroyed. The Emperor would lose his legitimacy. Political chaos would follow. Maybe even civil war across thousands of planets, all because 3 babies were scared and nobody could figure out how to calm them down. The meeting broke up with Renth assigning different teams to different solutions. Lucy went back to her supply cart, rolling it toward the storage room. Her shift was supposed to end in an hour, and she needed to restock the basic medical supplies that somehow kept disappearing during all this chaos. She was sorting bandages when she heard voices in the hallway. The human ambassador is asking questions. That was Renth's assistant, the floating jellyfish creature. He wants to know if human staff are safe. Everyone is safe, Renth replied, though his scales showed he was lying. The dragons are contained, for now. Honored physician, perhaps we should request assistance from the collective? They're bioengineers. No. Renth's voice was sharp. This is an internal matter. The Emperor will not show weakness by asking for outside help. They moved past the storage room and their voices faded. Lucy finished organizing supplies and locked the storage room. She took the long route back to the human quarters, which meant passing by the observation deck overlooking Bay 12. She shouldn't stop. She should go home, eat something, and sleep. She stopped anyway. Through the thick, transparent wall, she could see Bay 12. It looked more like a prison than a nursery. White walls, harsh lighting, and a maze of technological equipment humming and blinking. In the center, behind shimmering force fields, the 3 dragon hatchlings huddled together. They weren't attacking anything right now. They just sat in a tight group, wings folded, occasionally making those heartbreaking sounds. Lucy pressed her hand against the glass and watched them for a long time. They reminded her of the rescue animals back on Earth, the ones that came into the clinic where she'd volunteered during university, abused or abandoned, scared of everything, lashing out because they didn't know what else to do. Nobody here was treating them like scared babies. Everyone was treating them like malfunctioning equipment that needed fixing. Lucy pulled out her portable data pad and started taking notes. She had an idea forming, but it was probably stupid. She was just a nurse, and these were the Emperor's dragons. Still, she kept watching and kept taking notes. 6 days wasn't much time, but maybe it was enough. The pattern became clear by the second day Lucy started observing. Every new solution followed the same cycle. Scientists would arrive with confident expressions and sophisticated equipment. They'd implement their brilliant plan. Within hours, the dragons would either escape, destroy the equipment, or do something unexpected that made everything worse. Lucy watched from her usual spot near the observation window during her breaks. She'd started keeping a detailed log, though she wasn't sure why. Nobody asked for her opinion. Nobody would care what a human nurse thought about bioengineered Imperial dragons. The Graviton cage team arrived first, rolling in machines that hummed with power. The lead scientist was a crystalline being who reflected light in rainbow patterns when he moved. He explained the technology to High Physician Renth with obvious pride. Graviton manipulation creates a sphere of altered space-time, he said, gesturing with limbs that looked like they were made of living glass. The dragons cannot escape because there is nowhere to escape to. The cage exists in all possible quantum states simultaneously, Lucy wrote in her notes. Sounds complicated. Dragons are babies. Do babies understand quantum states? They activated the graviton cage around the 3 hatchlings. For the first few minutes it seemed to work. The dragons pressed against invisible walls, confused but contained. Then the smallest one, the dragon with scales that shifted toward blue, tilted its head and made a curious chirping sound. The cage shimmered. The blue dragon pushed one paw forward, and space seemed to bend around it. Suddenly, the dragon was outside the cage, looking as surprised as everyone else. Then it sneezed, and a bolt of plasma melted through the observation window. Everyone dove for cover. Lucy dropped behind a medical cart and heard screaming in 6 different languages. By the time guards arrived with sedative weapons, the blue dragon had freed its siblings. All 3 were flying in circles near the ceiling, apparently playing some kind of game while palace staff ran for their lives below. They learned to manipulate gravity, the crystalline scientist said numbly, after the dragons were finally cornered and moved to a new bay. In less than 30 minutes, they understood and countered technology that took my species 10,000 years to develop. Lucy added to her notes, dragons are smart. Treating them like problems to solve won't work if they're smart enough to solve the problems back. The next attempt involved psionics. A team of beings who looked like floating brains in mechanical bodies arrived with devices that glowed with inner light. They explained that dragon hatchlings had chaotic mental patterns that could be dampened and organized using psionic fields. We'll gently guide their thought processes toward calm, structured patterns, the lead psionic explained. They'll naturally become more docile. Lucy watched as they set up the equipment around Bay 14, where the dragons had been moved after the graviton cage disaster. The hatchlings were huddled together again, making those scared sounds that nobody else seemed to notice. When the psionic field activated, the change was immediate and horrible. The dragon started screaming, a sound that made Lucy's ears ring even through the observation glass. Their scales flashed through colors so fast it hurt to look at them. Then all three started emitting some kind of energy that made the air visible, like heat waves over summer pavement. The psionic devices exploded one by one, showering sparks across the bay. The floating brain beings retreated quickly, their mechanical bodies smoking. Their minds are too chaotic, one of them reported to Renth. Young consciousness, multiple quantum states, emotional intensity beyond our ability to dampen. We cannot help, Lucy wrote. Stop trying to change how they think. Start thinking about why they're scared. The molecular stasis team came next. They were confident they could succeed where others failed. We'll simply lock their molecules in place, and the team leader explained. They cannot use powers if they cannot move at the molecular level. Lucy had a bad feeling about this one. She'd seen stasis fields used in medical settings. They worked fine for surgery or transport, but they required the subject to be calm. Using them on a conscious, terrified creature seemed wrong. She was right to worry. When the stasis beams hit the dragons, something went terribly wrong. Instead of freezing, the dragons seemed to flicker in and out of existence. One moment they were solid, the next they were translucent. Then they'd phase through the floor or walls. They started appearing in random locations throughout the palace, each time more distressed and more dangerous. One dragon appeared in the Imperial Gardens and set 300-year-old trees on fire before vanishing again. Another materialized in the diplomatic quarters and scared a visiting ambassador so badly that he called for his fleet to evacuate him. The third appeared in Lucy's own quarters while she was sleeping. She woke up to find the green-scaled dragon curled on the end of her bed, scales flickering with that unstable translucence, whimpering in fear. Their eyes met, and Lucy saw something that made her heart ache. The dragon was just a baby, lost and terrified, phasing through reality with no control over what was happening. It's okay, Lucy whispered, not moving. You're okay. The dragon stared at her for a long moment, then vanished again with a soft pop of displaced air. Guards found all three dragons eventually, huddled inside a storage closet, solid again but traumatized. It took hours to coax them out and back into containment. Renth called an emergency meeting. Lucy wasn't invited, but she lurked near the door and listened. 4 days remain, Renth said, his scales a defeated gray. We've tried graviton manipulation, psionic dampening, and molecular stasis. Each attempt has made the situation worse. The Emperor is losing faith in our ability to resolve this. Perhaps the Delphian method? Someone suggested. Pheromone conditioning? Prepare it, Renth ordered. We're running out of options. Lucy knew about Delphian pheromone conditioning. It was used across the Imperium for animal training. Powerful chemical signals that triggered instinctive responses in most species. It was effective but impersonal, and it didn't actually solve behavioral problems, just masked them. The Delphian team arrived with tanks of synthesized pheromones and diffusion equipment. They set up around Bay 16, the sixth location the dragons had been moved to. Lucy watched as they explained the process. These pheromones will trigger submission and bonding responses, the Delphian team leader said. She looked like an otter but with 6 limbs and crystalline eyes. The dragons will become calm and receptive to the Emperor's presence. They released the pheromones into the bay. At first the dragons did seem calmer. They stopped their nervous pacing and sat down, sniffing the air curiously. The Delphian team leader smiled with satisfaction. Then the largest dragon, the one with red gold scales, walked up to one of the pheromone generators and bit it. The machine sparked and died. The dragon chewed thoughtfully, then swallowed the pieces. Its siblings joined in. Within minutes, all 6 pheromone generators had been eaten. The dragons burped small clouds of smoke and went back to their nervous huddle. They ate the equipment, the Delphian team leader said flatly. That shouldn't be possible. The generators are made of titanium alloy. Apparently dragon stomachs don't care, someone else muttered. After the Delphian team left, Renth stood alone in the observation area, staring at the dragons with his scales cycling through colors that Lucy suspected were the equivalent of a nervous breakdown. Lucy approached him carefully. Her heart was pounding, but she'd made her decision. Honored physician? She said quietly. He turned, seeming surprised she was there. Nurse Lucy, you should not be here. This area is restricted. I know. I'm sorry. But I've been watching the dragons and I have an idea. Renth's scales flickered to what Lucy interpreted as bitter amusement. An idea? We've exhausted the expertise of the Imperium's finest scientists. What could you possibly suggest? Lucy took a breath. Stop treating them like a problem that needs a technological solution. They're babies. Scared babies. Everything you've tried has made them more scared. Renth was quiet for a long moment. They are Imperial dragons. Bioengineered companions of immense power. Not Earth puppies. They're still babies, Lucy insisted, and I think I know how to help them. The physician looked at her, then at the dragons, then back at her. His scales shifted to a color Lucy didn't recognize. We have 3 days, he finally said. Every solution has failed. I will bring your suggestion to the Emperor, but understand if you fail, the consequences will be severe, for you and for humanity standing in the Imperium. Lucy nodded, her mouth dry. I understand, she just hoped she was right. The conference room was too large for just 3 people, but Lucy supposed that was the point. Emperor Talmanoth wanted space, wanted to emphasize the distance between them. The Emperor sat at the far end of a table made from something that looked like polished starlight, his insectoid form perfectly still. High Physician Renth stood to one side, his scales a neutral gray. Lucy stood at the other end of the table, trying not to shake. She'd seen the Emperor before, but only from a distance during ceremonies. Up close, he was even more intimidating. His carapace was deep purple-black, marked with gold patterns that seemed to move. 4 arms were folded across his chest, and his compound eyes reflected her image back at her in thousands of tiny fragments. Nurse Lucy Hayes, the Emperor said. His voice came from a translator device, but somehow still sounded ancient and tired. High Physician Renth tells me you believe you can succeed where the Imperium's greatest minds have failed. Lucy swallowed hard. Your Majesty, I don't know if I'll succeed, but I know why everyone else has failed. One of the Emperor's antennae twitched. Explain. She'd prepared for this, practiced in her quarters until the words felt right. Now facing the ruler of 3,000 star systems, her carefully planned speech evaporated. They're scared, she said simply. The baby dragons. They're terrified, and every solution we've tried has made them more scared. Scared animals lash out, scared babies cry. These dragons are doing both. They are not animals, the Emperor said, but there was no anger in his voice. They are bioengineered companions designed to bond with Imperial rulers. They should not be capable of fear. With respect, Your Majesty, everything capable of learning is capable of fear, and they've learned that this place is dangerous. Renth's scales flickered. What do you propose instead, Nurse Lucy? Lucy pulled out her datapad and displayed her notes. I've watched every attempt to contain them. The pattern is always the same. We put them in a scary place, use scary technology, and wonder why they react badly. We're treating symptoms, not the cause. The cause? The Emperor asked. They hatched 3 days ago into chaos. No parent, no safe space, no familiar anything. Just bright lights, strange creatures, and machines trying to control them. They're not malfunctioning. They're traumatized. The word hung in the air. Lucy wasn't sure it would translate properly, but Renth's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue-green. What is your solution? The Emperor asked. Stop using technology. Create a safe space. Establish routine. Give them time to feel secure before asking anything of them. Renth made a sound that might have been skeptical. We've tried containment in multiple bays. Those weren't safe spaces, Lucy interrupted, then immediately regretted her tone. I'm sorry, honored physician, but those bays were sterile, bright, full of equipment. They looked like laboratories, not homes. I want to create a nursery. A nursery. The Emperor repeated slowly. Yes. Soft lighting, warm colors, comfortable bedding. I want to remove all the monitoring equipment except basic cameras. I want to establish feeding times, playtimes, rest times. I want to treat them like babies, not security threats. They breathe plasma, Renth pointed out. They phase through solid matter. They're incredibly dangerous. They're also small, young, and scared, Lucy countered. I've worked with scared children before. Human children, yes, but the principles are the same. You can't force trust. You have to earn it. The Emperor was silent for a long time. His antennae moved in patterns Lucy couldn't interpret. You understand, he finally said, that if you fail, the consequences extend beyond yourself. Your species has worked for 8 decades to earn respect in the Imperium. This could damage that effort considerably. I understand, Your Majesty. You also understand that if the bonding ceremony does not occur within 3 days, the dragons will become feral. They will have to be destroyed. That would be a political catastrophe of the highest order. I understand. And yet you believe your primitive methods will succeed where advanced technology has failed? Lucy met his compound eyes, seeing herself reflected thousands of times. Yes, Your Majesty. Because they're not primitive methods. They're proven methods. My species spent 10,000 years learning to live alongside other species. We domesticated wolves into dogs. We gentled wild horses. We learned to read the emotions of creatures completely different from us. That's not primitive. That's experience. Another long silence. Then the Emperor's mandibles moved in what might have been a smile. High Physician Renth, prepare a bay according to Nurse Lucy's specifications. Give her whatever she requests. Renth's scales flashed surprise, but he bowed. Yes, Your Majesty. Nurse Lucy, the Emperor continued, you will have 2 days. If the dragons are not calm and ready for the bonding ceremony by then, we will proceed with termination protocols. I hope your experience proves sufficient. Thank you, Your Majesty. Lucy bowed awkwardly, not sure of the proper form. As she left the conference room, her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. She'd just promised the Emperor of the Imperium that she could handle his dragons that had defeated every advanced solution the galaxy could offer. She really hoped she was right. The next 6 hours were a blur of preparation. Renth assigned her Bay 20, the furthest from the main medical wing. Lucy submitted a list of supplies that made the procurement officer's eyes widen with disbelief. Fabric sheets, soft cushions, warm lighting fixtures. These are medieval supplies. These are what I need, Lucy said firmly. They gave her everything she asked for, probably because they expected her to fail. Lucy spent hours converting the sterile medical bay into something that looked almost cozy. She hung fabric in warm colors to soften the walls. She arranged cushions and blankets into comfortable nests in different corners. She adjusted the lighting until it was warm and gentle instead of harsh white. She set up a small heating element, because baby creatures often needed warmth. She even found a sound generator and programmed it to play soft, rhythmic sounds like rainfall. By the time she finished, Bay 20 looked nothing like the other containment areas. It looked like a home. Ambassador Orrin Wells found her during the final preparations. He was an older human, his hair gray, his face lined with decades of diplomatic stress. Lucy, he said quietly, do you understand what you're risking? I do, Ambassador. If you fail, they'll use this as evidence that humans aren't ready for more responsibility in the Imperium. Every xenophobe will point to this moment as proof that we're primitive and naive. Lucy looked at him steadily. And if I succeed? Wells was quiet for a moment. If you succeed, you'll have done something no other species could do. You'll have proven that humanity brings unique value to the Imperium. He paused. But that's a lot of pressure for one nurse. It's not pressure, Ambassador. It's just what needs doing. After Wells left, Lucy stood in the center of her nursery and took a deep breath. Everything was ready. The space was warm, soft, and safe. She'd prepared food, simple raw meat since that seemed to be what dragons ate. She'd memorized every note she'd taken about their behavior. Now came the hard part. I'm ready, she told High Physician Renth through the communication system. Bring them in. Nurse Lucy, are you certain you want no guards present? No safety equipment? I'm certain. The moment they see guards or feel threatened, this won't work. A pause. Your courage is noted. Transferring the dragons now. Lucy heard movement in the access corridor. Then the door opened and 3 small dragons were herded into the nursery by floating drones. The moment the dragons crossed the threshold, the drones retreated and the door sealed. Lucy was alone with them. The 3 hatchlings immediately huddled together, wings spread defensively. Their scales flickered through colors that Lucy had learned meant fear and aggression. The largest one, red gold scales, growled softly. The smallest, blue scales, whimpered. Lucy slowly sat down on the floor, making herself small and non-threatening. She didn't look directly at them, didn't move toward them. She just sat breathing calmly, waiting. Minutes passed. The dragons didn't attack, but they didn't relax either. Lucy began to hum softly. A lullaby her mother used to sing. The tune was simple, repetitive, soothing. The blue dragon's ears perked up. More minutes passed. Lucy kept humming, kept sitting still, kept being nothing more than a calm presence in their space. Slowly, carefully, the green-scaled dragon took 1 step forward. Then another. It stretched its neck toward Lucy, sniffing cautiously. Lucy didn't move, barely breathed. The green dragon came closer, close enough to touch. It looked at her with large, intelligent eyes that held so much fear and confusion. "It's okay," Lucy whispered. "You're safe now." The dragon tilted its head, considering. Then it made a soft chirping sound and settled down on the floor near Lucy's leg. Its siblings watched for a moment longer, then slowly joined it. By the time dawn light filtered through the fabric-covered walls, all three dragons were sleeping in a pile around Lucy. She was exhausted, uncomfortable, and happier than she'd been in months. Through the camera, High Physician Renth and Emperor Talmanoth watched in silence. "Remarkable," Renth finally said. "No technology, no force. Just patience." The Emperor's antennae moved thoughtfully. "Perhaps we have forgotten something important in our centuries of advancement. Perhaps the youngest species among us remembers truths we have lost." In the nursery, Lucy carefully reached out and rested her hand on the green dragon's warm scales. It sighed in its sleep and pressed closer. 2 days to prepare them for bonding. It wasn't much time, but it was a start. Lucy woke to the feeling of something warm and scaly pressed against her side. For a confused moment, she forgot where she was. Then she opened her eyes and saw 3 pairs of dragon eyes staring at her with intense curiosity. "Good morning," she said softly. The blue dragon chirped. The green one yawned, showing rows of sharp teeth. The red gold dragon just watched her with what Lucy was learning to recognize as cautious interest. She'd given them names in her head, though she knew the Emperor would name them properly during the bonding ceremony. Blue was Spark because of the little electrical charges that sometimes danced across her scales. Green was Shadow because of how quietly he could move. Red gold was Bright because her scales caught light like polished metal. "Hungry?" Lucy asked, slowly sitting up. All 3 heads turned toward the cooling unit where she'd stored the meat. Dragons might be bioengineered, but apparently some instincts were universal. Feeding time became the first routine. Lucy had studied animal behavior during her training, and she knew that routines created security. She portioned out the meat carefully, making sure each dragon got equal amounts. At first they tried to snatch and gobble, but Lucy was patient. "Wait," she said firmly, holding up her hand. "Wait your turn." It took several attempts, but eventually they learned. Spark would sit and wait until Lucy gave her permission. Shadow followed his sister's example. Bright took longer, her natural confidence making patience difficult, but she eventually settled down too. By the second meal, all 3 dragons were sitting in a neat row, waiting for Lucy's signal before eating. High Physician Renth visited during the afternoon. He stood outside the observation window, his scales showing amazement. "They're responding to verbal commands," he said through the communication system. "In less than a day." "They're smart," Lucy replied, scratching Shadow behind his ears. He leaned into her hand and made a rumbling sound that might have been purring. "And they want structure. They were lost before. Now they know what's expected. The Emperor is monitoring the feeds. He's impressed but concerned about the timeline. The bonding ceremony is in 36 hours. I know." Lucy did know, and the pressure was constant in the back of her mind. But she couldn't rush this. Trust took time. She spent the afternoon establishing more routines. Playtime involved simple games. She'd roll a ball and the dragons would chase it, tumbling over each other in their enthusiasm. She'd hide pieces of meat around the nursery, and they'd hunt for them, learning to use their senses without using their destructive powers. Rest time was just as important. Lucy would dim the lights, activate the soft rainfall sounds, and settle into the cushions. The dragons would curl up around her, their breathing gradually syncing with hers. It was during these quiet moments that she talked to them. "The Emperor is a good person," she said, running her hand along Bright's back. "I know everything's been scary, but he's not scary. He's been waiting for you for a very long time." Shadow made a questioning chirp. "I know you don't understand all the words," Lucy continued. "But you understand tone. You understand feeling. The Emperor wants to be your family. That's what the bonding ceremony is about. Family." Spark pressed her head against Lucy's knee, and electricity danced harmlessly across her scales. The first real challenge came that evening. A loud alarm sounded somewhere in the palace, some kind of drill or emergency in a distant section. The sound was muffled but still audible in the nursery. All 3 dragons immediately tensed. Spark's scales began flickering with violent energy. Bright's body temperature spiked, and smoke curled from her nostrils. Shadow started to phase, his body becoming translucent. Lucy felt her heart rate spike, but she forced herself to stay calm. "It's okay," she said in a steady voice. "It's just a sound. Just noise. Look at me." Spark was the first to respond, her eyes finding Lucy's. "That's good. Focus on me. The sound can't hurt you. Nothing here can hurt you." She kept talking, kept her voice calm and level. Slowly, the dragons began to relax. Spark's flickering stabilized. Bright's temperature dropped. Shadow became solid again. "Good," Lucy praised them. "That's so good." "You felt scared, but you didn't let the fear control you. That's brave." She made a mental note. The dragons could control their powers when they felt secure. The destructive episodes weren't about inability to control themselves. They were panic responses to fear and stress. That night, Lucy demonstrated something she'd been planning. She stood in the center of the nursery and pointed to each dragon in turn. "Spark, come," she said. The blue dragon trotted over immediately, eager to please. "Shadow, come." The green dragon followed, more cautious but trusting. "Bright, come." The red gold dragon hesitated. She was the most independent, the most dominant. Lucy waited patiently, not forcing, just expecting. Finally, Bright walked over and sat with her siblings. "Perfect," Lucy said, giving them each a piece of meat as reward. "Now we practice something important." She walked to one side of the nursery. "Stay," she commanded, holding up her hand. The dragons watched her but didn't follow. Lucy walked to the other side. "Stay." They remained in place, though Spark whined slightly. "Come," Lucy called. All three raced toward her, tumbling over themselves in their enthusiasm. Lucy laughed, the first time she'd genuinely laughed since this whole crisis began. They practiced the commands over and over: come, stay, wait, gentle, no. By the time Lucy settled in for the night, the dragons knew 5 basic commands and responded to them reliably. Through the observation feed, Emperor Telmanoth watched with growing wonder. "She's teaching them obedience," he said to Renth. "Not through force or technology, but through relationship." "It's remarkable," Renth agreed. "Though I confess I don't fully understand how it works." "Perhaps that's because we've forgotten how," the Emperor mused. "Our records show that ancient imperial dragons were bonded through similar methods. But those records are thousands of years old, and the knowledge seemed too primitive to preserve." The second day brought new challenges. A palace official accidentally triggered the door mechanism, and it slid open halfway before someone caught the error and sealed it again. But in those few seconds, Bright saw her chance and bolted. Lucy's heart stopped. If Bright got loose in the palace, especially this close to being bonded, it could ruin everything. "Bright, stop!" Lucy shouted. To her amazement and relief, the dragon skidded to a halt just outside the door. She looked back at Lucy, clearly torn between curiosity and obedience. "Come," Lucy said firmly. Bright hesitated one more moment, then trotted back inside. Lucy closed the door manually and then knelt down to the dragon's level. "I know you're curious," she said gently. "But running away isn't safe, not yet. Soon you'll have the whole palace to explore. But first we have to complete the ceremony." Bright made a sound that was almost like a sigh, then pressed her head against Lucy's chest. Lucy wrapped her arms around the dragon and felt the youngster's rapid heartbeat gradually slow to match her own. That evening, Lucy knew she had to address the biggest challenge. The dragons trusted her, but they needed to trust the Emperor too. The bonding ceremony would be stressful enough without the dragons seeing the Emperor as a threat. She called up images on a data pad and showed them to the dragons. Pictures of Emperor Telmanoth, his insectoid form captured from various angles. "This is the Emperor," she said, pointing to the images. "He's different from me, I know. Different shape, different look. But he's good. He's been waiting for you for so long." The dragons sniffed at the datapad with interest. Lucy played recordings of the Emperor's voice, letting them get used to the sound. "Tomorrow," she told them, "you'll meet him. And it might be scary because there will be other people there too. But I'll be with you. I won't leave you." Shadow pressed against her side. Spark chirped softly. Bright watched the images of the Emperor with intense focus. Lucy knew she'd done everything she could. The dragons were calm, responsive, and trusting. They understood basic commands. They could control their powers when they felt safe. But there was one dragon that still worried her. While Spark and Shadow had bonded easily, Bright remained slightly distant. She was obedient, but Lucy sensed a wall there, something that hadn't quite broken through. That night, Lucy sat up late with Bright while the other 2 dragons slept. The red gold dragon watched her with those intelligent eyes, and Lucy saw the challenge there. Bright was testing her, measuring her, deciding if this trust was real or just another trick. "I know," Lucy said softly. "You're the strong one, the leader. You don't give trust easily, and that's okay. That's actually smart. But I need you to understand something." She reached out slowly and rested her hand on Bright's warm scales. "You're not alone anymore. You have your siblings. You have me. And soon you'll have the Emperor. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Bright stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly the dragon lowered her head and rested it in Lucy's lap. It was the first time she'd voluntarily shown that kind of vulnerability. Lucy stroked the dragon's scales gently and felt some of that tension finally release. "There you go," she whispered. "That's trust." They sat like that for over an hour, human and dragon, until Bright finally fell asleep in Lucy's lap. When Lucy carefully shifted her to join her siblings, the red gold dragon didn't wake, but she made a small, contented sound. Lucy leaned back against the cushions, exhausted but satisfied. Tomorrow was the bonding ceremony. Tomorrow she'd have to hand these three creatures over to the Emperor and hope that everything she'd taught them would hold true under pressure. Tomorrow she'd find out if humanity's way of doing things really could make a difference in the Imperium. But tonight, she'd rest with three baby dragons sleeping peacefully around her, and that felt like victory enough. The ceremonial chamber was ancient, older than most species in the Imperium. Lucy stood at the entrance with three dragons sitting obediently beside her, and felt the weight of history pressing down like a physical force. The walls were carved from a single massive crystal that caught and reflected light in patterns that seemed almost alive. Thousands of beings filled the tiered seating, representatives from hundreds of worlds, all watching to see if the impossible would happen. If the Emperor's dragons would finally bond. Lucy's hands were shaking, but she kept them at her sides where the dragons couldn't see. She dressed in formal clothing, simple by palace standards, but the best she owned. The dragons wore nothing except polished scales and nervous energy. "Remember what we practiced," she whispered to them. "Stay calm. Stay together. Trust me." Spark pressed against her leg. Shadow sat perfectly still, though his scales flickered with anxiety. Bright stood slightly apart, her head high, watching everything with intense focus. High Physician Renth approached, his scales colored in formal patterns Lucy didn't recognize. "Nurse Lucy, the ceremony will begin shortly. Are you prepared?" "As prepared as I can be." Lucy's voice was steadier than she felt. "The Emperor will enter first. Then you'll bring the dragons to the center of the chamber. The bonding ritual has 3 parts. Renth explained the process, though Lucy had memorized it days ago. First, the Emperor will offer recognition. Second, the dragons must accept his presence. Third, they exchange genetic markers. If successful, the bond is permanent. And if it's not successful, Renth's scales darkened. Then we've failed, and the dragons will be terminated before they become feral. "I'm sorry, but that's Imperial law." Lucy's jaw tightened. "That won't happen. I hope you're right." Renth left to take his position. Lucy knelt down and looked at each dragon in turn. "This is it," she said softly. "Everything we've worked for. The Emperor is a good person. He's been waiting for you for 400 years. Let him in. Let him be your family." Bright made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been nervousness. The ceremonial horn sounded deep and resonant. The crowd fell silent. Doors on the opposite side of the chamber opened, and Emperor Talmanoth entered. He wore ceremonial armor that caught the light like captured stars. His forearms were spread in a ritual gesture, and his compound eyes reflected the assembled masses. Despite his alien form, there was something unmistakably regal about him, something ancient and enduring. The dragons tensed. Lucy felt Spark's body temperature spike. Shadow began to phase slightly, his edges going translucent. "Easy," Lucy murmured. "Remember the images. Remember his voice. He's not a threat." The Emperor took his position at the center of the chamber, standing on a raised platform carved with symbols that predated most current civilizations. He looked directly at Lucy and the dragons, and his antennae moved in what Lucy had learned was acknowledgement. An official she didn't recognize stepped forward, speaking in a language that the translator rendered as formal ceremonial words. Lucy caught the gist. Ancient tradition, imperial legitimacy, the importance of the bond between ruler and dragon. Then the official gestured to Lucy. The keeper may bring forth the hatchlings. This was it. Lucy stood and looked down at the dragons. Come, she said simply. They moved as one, following her toward the center of the chamber. Every step felt like walking through deep water. The silence was absolute. Thousands of beings watching, waiting to see if humanity's primitive methods would succeed or fail spectacularly. Lucy reached the platform and stopped. The dragons stopped with her, perfectly synchronized. She could feel their tension, their fear, their uncertainty. Emperor Talmanoth looked down at them, and Lucy saw something in his posture that gave her hope. He wasn't looking at them like problems to be solved or symbols to be claimed. He was looking at them the way someone looks at family they've been waiting lifetimes to meet. The Emperor spoke, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the chamber. I am Talmanoth, bearer of the ancient mandate, keeper of the Imperial Trust. For 400 years I have waited for this moment. For 400 years, I have held the memory of the last bonded dragons in my hearts. His translator gave the words weight and emotion that transcended species barriers. I offer you recognition, little ones. I offer you protection, purpose, and place. I ask that you accept the bond that has been prepared for you since before you hatched. The words were ritual, but the feeling behind them was genuine. Lucy could hear it, and apparently so could the dragons. Their tension eased slightly. Now comes the acceptance, the official announced. The hatchlings must approach the Emperor willingly, without coercion. This was the moment everything could fall apart. Lucy couldn't command them to go. She couldn't force them. They had to choose. She knelt down and looked at each dragon. Go on, she said softly. He's been waiting for you. Spark looked at Lucy, then at the Emperor, then back at Lucy. The blue dragon chirped nervously. It's okay, Lucy encouraged. I'm right here. I'm not leaving. Shadow was next to move, his natural caution warring with curiosity. He took one step forward, then another, his eyes never leaving the Emperor's form. Bright remained still, watching, calculating. Lucy's heart sank. The most dominant dragon, the natural leader, was going to refuse. She could see it in Bright's posture, in the set of her wings. Then Spark made her decision. The blue dragon walked forward, her small body brave despite obvious fear. She approached the Emperor and sat at the base of his platform, looking up at him with wide eyes. The Emperor's antennae moved in what Lucy recognized as pleasure. He extended one of his 4 hands, palm up, in a gesture of peace. Spark sniffed his hand carefully, then touched it with her nose. A small spark of electricity jumped between them, harmless but significant. The crowd gasped. First contact. Shadow, seeing his sister's courage, followed. He was more cautious, circling once before approaching. But he too eventually sat beside Spark and accepted the Emperor's touch. That left Bright. The red-gold dragon hadn't moved. She stood beside Lucy, her scales reflecting the crystal light, her eyes fixed on the Emperor with an intensity that made Lucy's stomach knot with worry. Please, Lucy whispered, too quiet for the crowd to hear, but hoping Bright could understand the feeling if not the words. Please trust me. Trust him. Long seconds passed. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. Lucy could see officials exchanging worried glances. This was taking too long. If Bright refused, if she rejected the bond, protocol demanded all 3 dragons be destroyed. Then something unexpected happened. A loud metallic bang echoed through the chamber. Someone in the upper tiers had knocked over something. Maybe a ceremonial artifact. The sound was sharp, sudden. Exactly the kind of noise that would have sent the dragons into panic just days ago. Spark flinched but stayed in place. Shadow flickered slightly but remained solid. Every eye in the chamber turned to Bright, waiting to see if she'd bolt or attack or unleash the destructive power that had caused so much chaos. Bright's head snapped toward the sound. Her scales began to flicker through colors that Lucy recognized as the precursor to plasma breath. The temperature around her spiked. Lucy didn't think. She just acted on instinct. Bright, no, she said firmly. The dragon's head swiveled to Lucy. Their eyes met. Gentle, Lucy said, using one of their practiced commands. Stay calm. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Bright's scales stopped flickering. Her body temperature dropped. She looked at Lucy for one more moment, and Lucy saw the decision being made. Bright turned away from Lucy and walked toward the Emperor. Not rushed, not hesitant. She walked with confidence, with dignity, with the bearing of the leader she was. She sat beside her siblings, and then she did something that made Lucy's eyes sting with tears. Bright looked back at Lucy and made a soft chirping sound, the same sound Lucy had used to comfort them during scared moments. It was acknowledgement. It was thanks. It was goodbye to the Keeper and hello to the Emperor. Emperor Talmanoth looked at the 3 dragons sitting before him, and his antennae moved through patterns of joy and relief. He knelt down, bringing himself closer to their level, and extended all 4 hands. "Welcome, little ones," he said softly. "Welcome home." The dragons approached his hands, sniffing, investigating. Then one by one they accepted his touch. Spark first, then Shadow, then Bright. The official stepped forward. "The acceptance is complete. Now comes the bonding." What happened next was difficult to describe in words. The Emperor placed 1 hand on each dragon, his 4th hand resting over his own primary heart. His body began to glow with soft purple light. The dragon's scales began to shimmer in response, their colors intensifying until they were almost too bright to look at. Lucy watched as genetic material exchanged between Emperor and dragons, as biological markers synchronized, as an ancient protocol written into their very DNA activated and connected them at the most fundamental level. The light grew brighter, and for a moment the dragons and the Emperor seemed to merge into a single entity. Then the light faded and they were separate again, but changed. The Emperor stood and the dragons stood with him. They moved in perfect synchronization, not because they were commanded, but because they were connected. The bond was complete. The chamber erupted in celebration. Beings of 100 different species made sounds of joy in 100 different ways. The Emperor raised his hands and the dragons spread their wings in perfect mirror of his gesture. Lucy felt tears running down her face. She'd done it. Against all odds, using nothing but patience and understanding, she'd gentled the ungentleable. She'd succeeded where the Imperium's greatest minds had failed. High Physician Rent approached her, his scales showing colors of amazement and respect. "Nurse Lucy Hayes, you have accomplished the impossible. The Imperium owes you a debt beyond measure." Lucy wiped her eyes, suddenly exhausted. "I just did what needed doing." "No," Rent said quietly. "You did what no one else could have done. You saw past the problem to the cause. You treated them with compassion instead of technology. You succeeded through relationship rather than force." The Emperor approached, the 3 dragons walking at his side with perfect trust. Up close, Lucy could see the change in them. They were calmer, more confident, but also more focused. The bond had given them purpose and stability. "Nurse Lucy," the Emperor said, "I have a request." Lucy bowed awkwardly. "Your Majesty? These dragons trust you. They've bonded with me, but they still need your guidance as they grow. I ask that you remain in the palace as royal companion keeper. Help me raise them properly." Lucy's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, I'm just a nurse." "Surely there are others more qualified." "There is no one more qualified," the Emperor interrupted gently. "You've proven that. Will you accept?" Lucy looked at the 3 dragons. Spark was watching her hopefully. Shadow had his head tilted in that curious way. Bright met her eyes with something that looked like expectation. "Yes, Your Majesty," Lucy said. "I'll stay." The Emperor's antennae moved in satisfaction. Then he did something unprecedented. He bowed to her, a shallow bow but a bow nonetheless. An Emperor bowing to a human nurse. "Thank you," he said simply. As the celebration continued around them, Lucy knelt down and let the 3 dragons crowd around her one more time. They chirped and nuzzled, still comfortable with her even though they now belonged to the Emperor. "You did so well," she told them. "I'm so proud of you." Ambassador Wells found her later after the official ceremonies had concluded. His eyes were bright and he was actually smiling. "Lucy, do you understand what you've accomplished? Not just for yourself, but for all of humanity?" "I helped some baby dragons," Lucy said, though she knew it was more than that. "You've proven that humanity brings something unique to the Imperium, something that can't be replicated by technology or genetic engineering. You've given us a place here." Lucy thought about that, about how the Imperium's reliance on advanced solutions had blinded them to simpler truths, about how sometimes the answer wasn't more complex but more compassionate. "Maybe we all needed reminding," she said, "that not every problem needs a high-tech solution. Sometimes you just need patience, kindness, and a willingness to understand." Wells smiled. "The galaxy is going to be learning that lesson from humans for a long time to come, thanks to you." Lucy looked across the chamber at Emperor Talmanoth, who was introducing his dragons to various officials. The dragons were calm, confident, and content. They'd gone from terrified, destructive hatchlings to bonded Imperial companions in just a few days. Not through force, not through technology, through relationship. Maybe that was humanity's gift to the Imperium after all. 2 weeks after the bonding ceremony, Lucy stood in the royal gardens watching 3 dragons play. They'd grown already, each now the size of large dogs instead of puppies. Their scales had deepened in color, and their movements had gained coordination and grace. But what struck her most was their happiness. Spark was chasing some kind of flying insect native to the palace ecosystem, her wings creating small electrical fields that made the air shimmer. Shadow was exploring a water feature, fascinated by his own reflection. Bright was perched on a stone bench beside Emperor Talmanoth, who was reviewing some kind of holographic document with one hand, while scratching behind her ears with another. The scene was so normal, so peaceful, that it was hard to remember the chaos of just 2 weeks ago. Remarkable transformation, High Physician Renth said, joining Lucy near a flowering tree that smelled like cinnamon. His scales were a contented green-blue today. I've been studying your methods, you know. My methods? Lucy smiled. I didn't invent anything new. That's precisely what makes it fascinating. You applied established principles from Earth animal behavior and child psychology. Nothing revolutionary by your species standards. But for us? He gestured around the gardens. Revolutionary indeed. What do you mean? Renth settled onto a bench designed to accommodate his serpentine body. The Imperium has spent millennia developing increasingly sophisticated solutions. We've forgotten that sophistication isn't always superior. When the dragons presented problems, we responded with our most advanced technology: graviton manipulation, psionic dampening, molecular stasis. But they were babies, Lucy said. You can't solve fear with technology. Exactly. We'd become so focused on what we could do that we forgot to ask what we should do. Renth's scales flickered thoughtfully. I've implemented new protocols in the medical wing. Comfort-based care for young patients. Environmental modifications to reduce stress. It seems obvious now, but it wasn't until you demonstrated it. Lucy watched Spark finally catch her insect, then immediately release it to chase again. Is it helping? Dramatically. Recovery times are faster. Stress responses are lower. Several other physicians have adopted similar approaches. He paused. You've started something, Nurse Lucy. Change doesn't happen quickly in the Imperium, but it does happen. Over the next few days, Lucy discovered just how much change was happening. She was called to meetings she never expected to attend. Species she'd only read about wanted to consult with her. A delegation from an aquatic world asked her to help with their juvenile training programs. A crystalline species requested information about emotional support techniques. Ambassador Wells was delighted. 3 requests for human advisors just this morning, he told Lucy during one of their regular check-ins. Not for military strategy or technological innovation, but for social programs, education, psychology, healthcare. That's good? Lucy asked. That's incredible. For 80 years, humanity has been trying to prove we belong in the Imperium. We've tried to compete on technology, on military strength, on resource production. We've been adequate but never exceptional. But this? He gestured to the data pad showing all the requests. This is something only we can offer. Lucy thought about that. Because we're the species that domesticated animals. Because you're the species that learned to cooperate with creatures completely unlike yourselves. You spent 10,000 years building relationships across species barriers. That's not primitive. That's expertise. The most unexpected meeting came from Emperor Talmanoth himself. He invited Lucy to his private study, a room she'd never seen before. It was smaller than she expected, with walls lined with something that looked like ancient books, though she suspected they were more sophisticated than they appeared. The 3 dragons were there too, now comfortable enough to nap while the Emperor worked. Bright was sprawled across a cushion that probably cost more than Lucy's entire year's salary. Shadow was curled in a sunny spot near the window. Spark was trying to sleep on the Emperor's desk, her tail hanging over the edge. Nurse Lucy, the Emperor greeted her. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Lucy sat in a chair that adjusted itself to her body with slightly unnerving precision. Your Majesty. I've been reviewing historical records, the Emperor said, gesturing to holographic displays that showed ancient text in languages Lucy didn't recognize. Documents about the first Imperial dragons from over 3,000 years ago. I wanted to understand how they were originally bonded. Did you find anything? I found everything. The Emperor's antennae moved in what Lucy had learned was a gesture of ironic amusement. The original bonding methods were almost identical to what you did. Patience, environmental comfort, routine, relationship building. No technology at all. What happened? Progress happened, or what we called progress. As the Imperium grew and technology advanced, we began to believe that better technology meant better solutions. The old ways seemed primitive, inefficient. We developed machines to bond dragons faster, drugs to make them calmer, genetic modifications to make them more controllable. The Emperor paused, looking at his sleeping dragons, and we lost something essential in the process. By the time I put these eggs in stasis, we'd lost the knowledge of how to bond naturally. When they hatched, we had no choice but to try technological solutions. But they didn't work, Lucy said. They couldn't work because relationship cannot be forced or automated. It must be earned. The Emperor touched Spark gently, and the blue dragon made a contented sound without waking. You didn't invent a new method, Nurse Lucy. You remembered an old one. A method so old that we'd forgotten it existed. Lucy wasn't sure what to say to that. She watched Shadow stretch in his sleep, completely secure and content. I wonder, the Emperor continued, how many other essential truths we've forgotten in our pursuit of advancement. How many problems we've complicated by applying sophisticated solutions when simple ones would suffice. I don't think simple solutions are always right, Lucy said carefully. Sometimes you need advanced technology. Sometimes complex problems need complex answers. True, but sometimes they don't, and wisdom is knowing the difference. The Emperor's compound eyes reflected her image back at her. Your species is young in the Imperium, Nurse Lucy. Young enough to remember truths that ancient species like mine have forgotten. That's valuable. The conversation stayed with Lucy for days. She continued her work with the dragons, who grew rapidly and learned new things every day. Spark became fascinated with electrical systems and could now operate simple switches with her mind. Shadow learned to control his phasing ability, using it for play rather than panic. Bright developed a talent for reading emotions, somehow sensing what people were feeling and responding appropriately. They were becoming exactly what Imperial dragons were meant to be, intelligent, powerful, and deeply bonded to their Emperor. But they were also still playful, curious, and affectionate. They'd run to Lucy whenever they saw her, demanding attention and treats. They'd curl up around her during rest periods, same as they did with the Emperor. They'd learned that they could have multiple bonds, multiple sources of security and love. One afternoon, Lucy found herself in the palace common area where off-duty staff gathered. She was surprised to be approached by a being from a species she didn't recognize. Tall, with crystalline skin that chimed softly when they moved. Nurse Lucy Hayes? I'm Medical Coordinator Thren from the Crystalline Union. I wanted to thank you personally. Thank me? For what? For your work with the dragons. I've been studying your methods and implementing them in our medical facilities. We have many young who undergo crystallization during maturity, a process that's very stressful. We've always used chemical suppressants and isolation to manage the stress. And now we're trying comfort-based protocols, environmental modifications, support systems. It's early, but the results are promising. Thren chimed softly, a sound that seemed happy. You've reminded us that just because something is traditional doesn't mean it's optimal. Lucy met more people like Thren over the following days. A military strategist who was applying relationship-building techniques to alliance management. An educator who was redesigning learning environments based on Lucy's nursery setup. A diplomat who wanted advice on cross-species communication. This is getting overwhelming, Lucy confessed to Ambassador Wells one evening. I'm just a nurse. I'm not qualified to advise all these people. You're qualified by experience and by success, Wells replied. And you're not alone. The requests coming in for human advisors have increased exponentially. We're recruiting psychologists, educators, animal behaviorists, social workers. People with expertise in exactly the skills the Imperium needs. Skills they didn't value before. Skills they didn't realize they needed before. Wells smiled. You've opened a door, Lucy. Now others are walking through it. The most significant change came 3 weeks after the bonding ceremony. Lucy was called to attend a session of the Imperial Council, something that never happened to junior staff. She entered the massive council chamber with her heart pounding, trying to remember protocol, Emperor Talminoth sat at the center of a circular platform, surrounded by representatives from the major species of the Imperium. The three dragons lay at his feet, calm and attentive. "Counselors," the Emperor said, "I've called this session to propose a formal change to Imperial policy. I propose the creation of a new advisory position, Interspecies Relationship Specialist." Murmurs filled the chamber. Lucy stood very still, trying to be invisible. "The recent crisis with the Imperial dragons has revealed a significant gap in our collective knowledge," the Emperor continued. "We possess immense technological capability, but we've lost touch with fundamental principles of relationship, trust, and emotional intelligence. I propose that humanity, with their unique experience in cross-species cooperation, take the lead in filling this gap." A beetle-like being raised a chitinous arm. "Your Majesty, with respect, humans are one of the youngest species in the Imperium. How can they advise elder species? Because youth has advantages that age sometimes forgets. Humanity spent 10 millennia learning to cooperate with other species on their homeworld. They've been training for multi-species cooperation since before they left their planet. That experience is valuable." The discussion went on for over an hour. Some counselors were skeptical. Others were intrigued. But eventually the measure passed. Humanity would establish an advisory corps dedicated to relationship and social issues across the Imperium. After the session, the Emperor approached Lucy directly. "This began with you, Nurse Lucy, with 3 terrified dragons and 1 patient human who saw past the problem to the cause. I just wanted to help them," Lucy said. "And in helping them, you've helped the entire Imperium remember something important." The Emperor gestured, and all 3 dragons came to his side. "Power isn't just about technology or force. It's about connection, understanding, the ability to bridge gaps between different forms of life." Bright walked over to Lucy and pressed her head against Lucy's hand. The gesture was simple but profound, a recognition that bonds transcended formal ceremonies and imperial mandates. That evening, Lucy stood once more in the royal gardens. The sunset painted the sky in colors Earth never saw, and the air smelled of alien flowers. 3 dragons played nearby, occasionally glancing over to make sure both Lucy and the Emperor were still there, still watching, still part of their family. Ambassador Wells joined her at the garden's edge. "You know what this means, don't you? You've given humanity a new identity in the Imperium. We're not the warriors or the innovators or the traders. We're the empathy specialists, the relationship builders. Is that enough?" Lucy asked. "Some species have technology thousands of years more advanced. Others have military might that could destroy solar systems. What do we have? Patience and understanding. Don't underestimate those gifts," Wells said. "Technology fails. Military might creates enemies. But relationship, connection, understanding, those are the foundations everything else is built on. You've reminded the Imperium of something they'd forgotten. That advancement without wisdom is just complexity without purpose." Lucy watched Spark chase, shadow through the air while Bright supervised from below. The Emperor sat on a bench nearby, reviewing documents but always aware of his dragons, always connected to them. "The galaxy is going to be different now," Wells continued. "Not because of weapons or machines, but because one human nurse remembered that scared babies need comfort, not control. That's going to ripple outward in ways we can't even predict yet." Lucy thought about that, about how a simple act, sitting quietly with 3 terrified dragons, had changed her life, changed the Imperial Palace, and might be changing the Imperium itself. "I hope we're ready for that responsibility," she said. "We've been preparing for it for 10,000 years, Wells replied. "We just didn't know it." As the alien sun set completely and strange stars emerged in the sky, Lucy called to the dragons. All 3 came immediately, followed by the Emperor. They sat together in the garden, human and Emperor and dragons. A family formed not through force or technology, but through patience, trust, and the simple recognition that sometimes the best solutions are the oldest ones. In the weeks and months that followed, the story of the Emperor's dragons would spread across 3,000 star systems. It would become a parable, a lesson, a reminder. But for Lucy, sitting in that garden with 3 dragons pressed against her and an Emperor who'd learned to value wisdom over sophistication, it was simply this: proof that humanity had found its place in the stars not through being the strongest or the smartest, but through remembering what really mattered. connection, understanding, the gentle art of turning fear into trust, and sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to change everything.